So the first story of tonight is Trump's Madison Square Garden rally and the controversy that resulted from it. So this story actually comes in two parts. So I'm not sure if you guys watched the Madison Square Garden rally or at least part of it, but the controversy came when they invited this comedian named Tony Hinchcliffe to give a speech, right? So he made a joke during this speech where he implied that Puerto Rico was an island of garbage. Now, this is significant because Puerto Ricans, as in case you guys don't know, they're American citizens, but they live on the U.S. territory of Puerto Rico. And although Puerto Rico does not vote in the American presidential election itself, there are a lot of people of Puerto Rican descent that are living in the United States, especially in these swing states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and other places that could have a noticeable impact on the election. So this joke was very poorly received and poorly timed, I guess you can say. Now, the Democrats, after this island of garbage kind of comment, they seized upon it, saying that this is definitely Trump's MO, and this is what you would expect from Trump's people. And yeah, that's kind of what the Democrats were saying. However, the second part of this story is that there's actually been sort of a reverse update where President Biden, I guess I always forget that he's still the president, right? Because he's been kind of just out of the mainstream media for a really long time. But somebody, I think it was CNN, who interviewed President Biden and asked him what he thought of, the Tony Hinchcliffe kind of just joke that went really badly. And he just went all out, right? So I'm not sure if I can play the clip. If I find the clip, I'll play it right now. And you guys can see for yourself exactly what Biden said in response, right? And I don't care if this gets copyright struck or something. I think it's important for us to hear the original audio and the original video. So let me play it.
And just the other day, a speaker at his rally called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. Well, let me tell you something. I don't know the Puerto Rican that I know, or Puerto Rico where I'm in my home state of Delaware. They're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization of seen as unconscionable, and it's un-American. It's totally contrary to everything we've done, everything we've been.
And yeah, as you guys saw, the clip just basically showed Biden. He legitimately called Trump supporters garbage. So I'm not sure if there's like different ways to spin it. Of course, the Democrats are going to be like, hey, like he was taken out of context and he just slipped. And this is not what he meant. But I don't know. To me, it's pretty clear, right? So let me go back to the Tony Hinchcliffe kind of thing, where if you guys don't know who he is, he again, as I said, he's a comedian, right? And he's primarily known for roast comedy. So this is an individual, Hinchcliffe, who is just his entire career is just insulting people and roasting people. Like literally, that's what he does, right? And I agree that he should not have made that joke during the Trump rally. It looked really bad for Trump. But what I will say is that he's only one guest speaker out of a whole slew of guest speakers that spoke at that rally. And again, he's a comedian, right? So he's somebody in the entertainment industry versus with the Biden thing. Again, in case you guys forgot, and I always forget, Biden is still the current sitting president. So yeah, I think there's a little bit of a difference here, right? So I'm sure you guys saw the Biden clip as well. As I told you guys, the host, to watch it earlier. So my question to you is, how do you think about these two events? Like, which one is worse, right? So if you ask me, I'm just going to impart my opinion now. If you ask me, the Biden thing was much worse because he called 50%, basically it's 50% of America supports Trump. He called them garbage. And also, he's a much more important person, right? He's literally the current sitting president. versus Hinchcliffe is just some random comedian. And again, I think this is an important piece of distinction. But I mean, if you guys think that I'm just being unfair or being super biased in either way, let me know, right? But here's kind of like a pushback of granted, this is someone who's I think pretty pro Trump, right? But this is a Twitter user who posted this tweet, and what he said was, "Hey, Joe Biden is now crawling back his comment that he didn't call Trump supporters garbage." When we all saw the video where he says the only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters, right? That's the direct quote. So I don't think there's any argument you can make on that. So Kamala has called us Nazis. Hillary says deplorable. Biden says garbage. So here's the message to Kamala, Obama, and Biden. The military is not garbage. Nurses are not garbage. Basically, it's like, all these people, there's a certain group, there's a large, I don't know if it's a majority or not, but there's a large proportion of those people from those groups, like military people, nurses, teachers, firemen, auto workers. They're supportive of Trump, right? And like, why did you just call them garbage? Isn't that really bad, right? So yeah, this is one person's opinion. And let me just share with you this kind of funny graphic of this artist called Beeple. And if you guys don't know who Beeple is, I think he was the one that sold the world's most expensive NFT back in the 2021 crypto cycle. So he made an artwork of Biden making his accusations while standing on his pulpit around a garbage dump. So again, that's just one person's an artistic interpretation. So let me pass the question off to you guys. What do you guys think of both of these stories, of the Hinchcliffe thing and of the Biden thing? Which one do you think is worse? And do you think it's going to affect the election? This is kind of my secondary main question. So yeah, feel free to take it away, either one of you.
Yeah, so with regards to Hinchcliffe, Tony, whatever we're gonna call him, his joke, I think it's important to remember that humor is subjective. Something one person finds funny is not something other people are going to find funny. And sometimes the comedian is going to do well with some audiences, sometimes it's not going to do so well. In this case, I think it is pretty safe to say that the general audience didn't like the humor. Maybe some of the people at the event like the humor, but I would say that the general gist is that the joke did not land the way it was intended. Now, on that front, I think that it's a joke. Like, at the end of the day, I don't think that we should be basing our opinions of like the overall group at the rally based on the jokes that didn't land from a comedian. Because like, I've been to comedy shows, sometimes they make jokes that don't land, sometimes they make jokes that do land. So you don't really know what's going to happen before you make a joke. You don't know how the crowd's going to receive it. You don't know if everyone and their dog's going to look at it with like a clinical point of view, which I feel like is kind of where this was coming out to, where I do feel like people are kind of looking at this joke as like a statement rather than a joke. So for me, I think that it's a bit strange to kind of pull out a joke and basically act like it's a political statement. I think that this person, I don't think that the people at the Trump rally are all going there going, Puerto Rico was an island of garbage, right? I think that it's very much an attempt at humor, and the humor didn't land. So I think it's whatever, right? Like, I don't think that we should be getting angry at comedians for making jokes that don't land, because if we did, we would never stop being angry at comedians, because comedians make a lot of jokes and it's impossible for everyone to like all of their humor. And yeah, I just don't think that, I think that it's a little bit silly to use that as the primary, or as a large reason to get angry at Trump on that front.
And just to interrupt you a bit before you move on to the next part, I think it's important for me to provide some more context on this potentially. So, with the Hinchcliffe joke about Puerto Rico being an island of garbage, I think this is derived from the fact that Puerto Rico does have a problem with garbage management. So, not to defend Tony Hinchcliffe, but it's like, of course I would not have made that joke, right? I think it's a joke that was made in bad taste. I agree with that. But just to provide more context, he wasn't even necessarily saying that the people of Puerto Rico are garbage. It's just commentary on how the waste management system of Puerto Rico is really bad. And I think that's kind of a little bit of context of where he was getting at. And of course, it didn't land because he made it sound like he was calling the people garbage. But I think if you were to look at it from the optimistic side, like, he wasn't maybe even intending on calling the people there garbage. He was just critiquing the government's ability to manage waste, right? And I've heard from multiple people online. Again, I don't know any like Puerto Ricans in real life, but I've seen people comment online. It's like, hey, I'm Puerto Rican, and the garbage management on the island is just terrible, and there is trash in a lot of places on like beaches and stuff, and it is really bad. Again, I'm not saying, like, I didn't say that, right? Like, this is just what I've heard people who claim at least to be Puerto Ricans say. So just to provide a little bit more context on that. But Tristan, finish your thought.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, regardless of whether or not there is validity in the joke or not, I think that it's important to remember that it is just that, a joke. I don't know why people are getting super offended about it, because it just seems like a little bit like it's a bad joke. You know, if I got mad at all the jokes that were at my expense that weren't particularly funny, you know, I would be getting mad at a lot of stuff, and it doesn't really seem super worth it. But I don't know, maybe, and to be fair, I didn't listen to the whole commentary on this front, so maybe I miss some additional context. Like, maybe he was just kind of leaning into it a little bit too hard, because I will say that there are definitely times where you know, jokes are all good and fun until you start to feel like the other person is serious. So it could have that element where people were feeling like he was just being rude, rather than making an all good and fun and games joke that was maybe a bit risque. So, you know, I think that that's also a possibility. But again, at the end of the day, it's just like a random comedian. I've never heard him before. I guess they made a poor choice on picking their comedian, or having him make a joke on that front. With regards to Biden, I think it's a risky endeavor, saying that the people who support Trump are garbage. But at the same time, like, I can see kind of his thought process of like, I've got to fire back with the you know, a counter to that to defend the Puerto Ricans, and by doing that, I'm going to call them garbage, which I don't think landed either. So and I think on that front, I think that is probably more of a risky strategy, because like, I think the humor, the joke is like a joke in poor taste, but I don't think that everyone is going, he meant it so much and this is a reflection of what Trump thinks. Whereas Biden saying this specifically, it's definitely more of a reflection of what Biden thinks, and it's from the horse's mouth. So it is definitely, Biden saying something that people may take offense to. That being said, is it really going to make that much of a difference? Like, I feel like a lot of the people who would classify themselves as Trump supporters, aka kind of like the people Biden is referring to, I don't think they were going to vote for Biden or Harris anyway. So it's like, is it actually going to move the needle, or is it just going to give more ammunition to people to kind of complain about Biden and Harris? Like, I don't think it's going to be. I don't think it's necessarily that big of a deal either.
Well, let me push back on that, because I do think that there are still a very small percentage of people that are legitimately can't decide between Trump or Harris, right? That's just looking for a reason to vote for one way or another. And what Biden said, I don't think is very helpful. In fact, I think it's done a really great job at driving people away. So I think you kind of would agree with me on this one as well, Tristan, that what Biden said is what is worse than what happened with the comedian Hinchcliffe at Madison Square Garden, because again, there's such a disparity between the positions of these two people, right? You have the current sitting president of the United States. He's literally the president, although people forget that. And then you have a random comedian that supposedly is a Trump supporter that not too many people have even heard of, right? Like, I don't think you said you have never heard of him. I've never heard of him. I don't think, Dom, I don't think you've heard of him either, right? Before this whole controversy. So again, I think it's just such a disparity between the two. And also, as you said, Tristan, what Hinchcliffe said was a joke. Now, a joke can be interpreted multiple different ways, but what Biden said was just kind of, they call it a slip, but it's a slip in the sense that that's actually what's going through his head, right? Like, unless you want to go down the conspiracy theory route, because there's a conspiracy theory out there that's saying that Biden actually hates Kamala Harris and he hates all the establishment Democrats and he wants to purposely sabotage them because they, like, quote unquote, stole his throne and usurped him and stuff like that and forced him to drop out. I'm not going to get into that. I don't think that that's a very likely, although maybe it's possible, but I don't think that that's a likely scenario. I think Biden just slipped, right? And he legitimately said what he thought when it came into his head. And again, this is not a good look for the party that is supposed to be the party of unity, right? Because the Democrats have run on this message of unity, and they're saying how Trump is a divisive fascist and he's gonna put Americans against other Americans. Well, who's the one putting Americans against other Americans when you call half of America, or at least a good decent like 40% of America, garbage, right? So this is just my opinion. Again, I know I'm super biased on this, but let me pass it to Dom, who hasn't spoken in a while. So what do you think?
Based off like what everything and everyone was saying and stuff, I think both parties kind of took a high risk approach of this whole situation. I think all in all, we have to understand that this comedian is a comedian and he just wanted to make a punchline as a joke and not to be like extremely serious and stuff. But I also think it might be a little bit of his fault for like trying to do it in the first place. He could have just taken a step back and not taken that risk just for like the sake of like one punchline. Now it's like become this whole thing, right? So I think in hindsight, he probably just should have held that back rather than pulling out the joke. And now you're in kind of like this weird situation and possibly making it worse for everyone. And for like Joe Biden's side, like, yeah, maybe it's just sort of like a Freudian slip. Like it came out nowhere. He probably should have said that or reworded things a little bit better instead of just saying like, oh, their whole party's garbage. I don't know if that was necessarily the move to do too. I think, yeah, like what Andy was saying, maybe it's just like what he really thought, and he probably shouldn't have said that, but it ended up happening anyways. But yeah, they definitely should have done something differently. And for the comedian, like, I think what Tristan's saying, like, he's a comedian. He's just trying to make jokes, right? It's not like there's like a certain level of non-seriousness. There is seriousness, but like non-seriousness. And I think to what Andy was saying, he was probably just referring to, like the state of the garbage situation in Puerto Rico rather than the people being called Puerto Rican garbage. So I think everything's just slipping in the cracks here, and it's all like a huge misunderstanding. But I think Biden could have worded things differently, and he could have just not brought up the joke in the first place.
Do you think either of these events have the potential or will change the end result? Like, will it move the needle in terms of the actual election? Do you think?
Just like probably less than 5% of like the actual movements of things. I think for some reason, I think people are more in tune to like what's his face, Trump actually appearing on Joe Rogan rather than this instance. So I feel like I'm not sure if this will move the needle too much, but because like I didn't know about this until it was brought to my attention, but I definitely know about like Trump going on Rogan and Kamala maybe going on Rogan. So I feel like that has much bigger impact for sure. Just because like if you look at the view count in comparison, I think that Trump video has like tons of views and like continuously is getting more and more. So I think that probably has more pull.